The diner's door slammed open, shattering the quiet hum of the jukebox. Emma Grayson froze, her tray of coffee mugs wobbling as a man in a tailored coat stormed in. His eyes wild, like he was running from something or someone. He slid into the corner booth, his hands trembling as he shoved a crumpled napkin across the table toward her. "Take this," he whispered, voice low and urgent. "And don't tell anyone you saw me." Emma's heart pounded. Who was he? Why was he hiding in a nowhere town like Maplewood, Tennessee? Before she could speak, he dropped a $100 bill on the table and vanished into the rainy night, leaving her clutching the napkin with words she was too shaken to read. The neon sign outside Millie's diner flickered, casting a pink glow over the cracked asphalt of Route 17. Inside, the air smelled of fried onions and second chances, but Emma's mind was on the stranger. She tucked the napkin into her apron, her fingers brushing the ink, and forced herself to focus. The dinner rush was starting, and she couldn't afford to lose her head. Not with Noah waiting at home, counting on her to keep their world from crumbling. Emma was 28, a single mother who'd learned to smile through exhaustion. Her life was a cycle of double shifts, bills, and Noah's bedtime stories in their cramped apartment. Maplewood was the kind of town where dreams faded quietly, and Emma's had faded years ago when Jake, her high school sweetheart, walked away, leaving her with a toddler and a broken heart. She'd built walls since then, trusting only in hard work and the love she had for her son. But that napkin, heavy with mystery, felt like a crack in those walls. She unfolded it behind the counter, her hands still unsteady. The words were scrawled in black ink. "You're stronger than you know. Keep going." No name, no hint of why. Just a message that felt too personal, like he'd seen the weight she carried and wanted to lift it. Emma's chest tightened. Was it a kind gesture? A rich man's whim? Or something more? You okay?" Millie called from the kitchen. The diner's owner was in her 60s, with gray curls and a warmth that hid her own struggles. The diner was her life, but whispers of unpaid rent hung over it like a storm cloud. "Yeah, just a weird tip," Emma said, slipping the note back into her pocket. The $100 was still there, untouched. Money like that felt like trouble, and Emma had enough of that already. The rest of the shift blurred by. Spilled coffee, a cranky regular, Noah's babysitter texting that he missed her. By midnight, Emma locked up, the napkin burning a hole in her thoughts as she walked home under the stars. Who was this man, and why did his words feel like they knew her? The next morning, Emma woke to Noah's laughter, a sound that always grounded her. He was 6, sprawled on the living room rug, building a tower of blocks that leaned dangerously to one side. His brown curls were hers, but his hopeful eyes were Jake's, a reminder of promises broken. She knelt beside him, ruffling his hair. "Mom, pancakes today?" Noah asked, grinning. "Maybe tomorrow, buddy," she said, her heart twisting. The $100 sat in her purse, but she hadn't touched it. Felt like a debt she didn't understand. At the diner, the morning was slow, the usual breakfast crowd thinned by a drizzly spring rain. Emma was wiping down the counter when the bell chimed. Her breath caught as the man from last night, Caleb, she'd learn later, walked in, his coat damp but still pristine. He took the same corner booth, his gaze fixed on the window, like he was watching for someone. Millie nudged her. "Your mystery man's back. Gonna talk to him?" Emma hesitated, the note's words echoing. "You're stronger than you know." She grabbed the coffee pot, her voice steadier than she felt. "Back for more coffee?" He looked up, and their eyes met properly for the first time. His were gray, stormy, carrying a weight she couldn't place. "Something like that," he said, his voice low with a city accent. "New York, maybe." "What's your name?" "Emma," she said, surprised by her openness. "And you?" "Caleb," he replied, after a pause that felt heavy. "Just passing through." She didn't buy it. Nobody passed through Maplewood unless they were lost or hiding. But she nodded, pouring his coffee. "You left a big tip last night. And a note." His jaw tightened, just for a moment. "Did you read it?" "Yeah." She waited for an explanation. None came. Instead, he pulled out another napkin, his pen moving with purpose. Emma's pulse raced. Was this a game? A challenge? Before she could ask, the door burst open, and Mr. Hargrove, Millie's landlord, stormed in. His face was red, his voice sharp. "Millie, we need to talk. Rent's overdue, and I'm not waiting anymore." Emma's stomach dropped. The diner was more than a job. It was home, a lifeline for her and Noah. She glanced at Caleb, who was watching the scene unfold, his expression unreadable. The napkin in her pocket felt heavier than ever, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this stranger, with his cryptic words and haunted eyes, was about to change everything. The rain picked up outside, drumming against the diner's windows as Hargrove's voice echoed. Emma busied herself with cleaning, but her mind was on Caleb. Why had he come back? And why did his note feel like it saw her in a way no one else had? She stole a glance at him, catching the way his fingers tapped the table, restless, like he was wrestling with something inside. Millie emerged from the kitchen, her face pale but composed. "Emma, can you handle the front? I'll deal with Hargrove." Emma nodded, her throat tight. The diner's troubles weren't new, but they'd never felt this close to breaking. She approached Caleb's booth, determined to get answers. "Why'd you write that note?" she asked, her voice low so no one else could hear. He looked up, his eyes searching hers. "You looked like you needed it," he said simply, but there was a depth to his words, like he knew what it was to carry a burden alone. Emma frowned. "You don't even know me." "Maybe not," he said, sliding the new napkin toward her. "But I know what it's like to feel stuck." She didn't touch the napkin yet, her guard still up. "You're not just passing through, are you?" He almost smiled, a flicker of something warm breaking through his guarded expression. "You're sharp," he said. "Let's just say I needed a place to think." Before she could press further, a crash came from the kitchen. Millie had dropped a tray, her hands shaking as Hargrove's voice grew louder. Emma rushed to help, but not before slipping the new napkin into her pocket. When she glanced back, Caleb was gone, leaving only his coffee cup and another $100 bill. That night, alone in her apartment, Emma unfolded the second napkin. "Meet me at the park tomorrow, noon. I owe you an explanation." Her heart raced. She didn't trust easily, not after Jake, not after years of broken promises. But something about Caleb's words, his quiet intensity, pulled at her. She tucked the note away, unsure if she'd show up, but knowing one thing. This stranger had already stirred something in her she thought she'd buried long ago. Emma stood at the edge of Maplewoods Park, the noon sun cutting through the spring chill. Her hands were stuffed in her jacket pockets, one clutching the napkin with Caleb's scrawled invitation. "Meet me at the park tomorrow, noon. I owe you an explanation." She'd debated all morning whether to come. Noah was at school. Millie had given her the lunch shift off, and the diner's troubles loomed like a shadow. Showing up felt reckless. Trusting a stranger with haunted eyes and cryptic notes wasn't her style. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, had pulled her here, to the rickety bench by the duck pond where Caleb now sat, his coat folded neatly beside him. He looked up as she approached, his gray eyes softer in the daylight but still carrying that unspoken weight. "You came," he said, his voice low, like he hadn't been sure she would. "You said you owed me an explanation," Emma replied, crossing her arms. "So explain." Caleb gestured to the bench, but she stayed standing, her guard up. He nodded, respecting her distance. "Fair enough," he said, rubbing his hands together as if to steady himself. "My name's Caleb Harper. I'm not just passing through. I'm hiding." Emma's brow furrowed. "Hiding? From what?" He exhaled, glancing at the pond where ducks glided lazily. "From my life, my family, a mess I made in New York." He paused, like the words were heavy. "I'm not proud of it, but I walked away from everything. A business, a name, people who depended on me. I needed somewhere quiet to figure out what's next. Maplewood seemed as good a place as any." Emma studied him, her skepticism warring with the honesty in his voice. "So you leave $100 tips and write notes to strangers? That's your plan?" He almost laughed, a sound that felt rusty, like he hadn't used it in a while. "The note, That was a moment of weakness. You looked like you were carrying the world, and I guess I saw myself in that. The tip was because I could afford it. No strings, I promise. Her chest tightened at his words. She'd spent years hiding her struggles, pasting on a smile for Noah, for Millie, for the world. How had a stranger seen through her so easily? You don't know me, she said, echoing her words from yesterday. I don't, he admitted. But I'd like to. The air between them shifted, charged with something Emma wasn't ready to name. She sat on the bench, leaving space between them. Why me? Why not just keep running? Caleb looked at her, his gaze steady. Because you didn't throw the note away. The park meeting lingered in Emma's mind as she returned to the diner that afternoon. Millie was behind the counter, her usual warmth dimmed by worry. Hargrove's visit yesterday had left a mark. Rent was due in a week, and the diner's bank account was as empty as the booths during a rainstorm. Emma wanted to tell Millie about Caleb, about the notes, but the words stuck. Instead, she threw herself into work, serving coffee and smiles while her thoughts churned. Caleb didn't show at the diner that day or the next. Emma told herself it didn't matter. She had enough to worry about with Noah's school fees and the diner's fate. But each time the bell chimed, her eyes flicked to the door, half expecting his tailored coat and stormy gaze. On the third day, she found a new napkin tucked under a plate in his usual booth, though she hadn't seen him come in. Meet me at the community center tonight, 7 p.m. I want to help. Her pulse quickened. Help with what? And why was he still playing this game of notes? That evening, Emma left Noah with the babysitter and headed to the community center, a squat brick building where Maplewood held town meetings and bake sales. Inside, a small crowd buzzed around folding tables, discussing the diner's plight. Millie stood at the front, her voice steady but strained. We've got a week to raise $10,000, or Hargrove's shutting us down. This diner's been here 40 years. It's more than a business. It's our home. Emma's throat tightened. She spotted Caleb in the back, his coat swapped for a plain sweater, blending in but still out of place. He caught her eye and nodded, a quiet acknowledgement. Before she could approach, a woman in a crisp blazer stood up. Lydia, Hargrove's assistant. Mr. Hargrove's sympathetic, she said, her tone anything but. But business is business. Pay by next Friday, or the property's sold. Murmurs rippled through the room. Emma clenched her fists, anger flaring. The diner wasn't just Millie's. It was where she'd rebuilt her life, where Noah drew crayon masterpieces on slow afternoons. Losing it would break something in all of them. Caleb stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. What if we raised the money? A fundraiser here in town. I'll match every dollar donated, up to $5,000. The room went silent. Emma stared, her mind racing. Who was this man, throwing around thousands like it was nothing? Millie's eyes widened, hope flickering. You'd do that, stranger? Caleb, he said, glancing at Emma. And yeah, I would. The meeting erupted in plans, bake sales, a car wash, a talent show. Emma cornered Caleb outside as the crowd dispersed. Why are you doing this? She demanded. You don't even know Millie. He shoved his hands in his pockets, the night air cool between them. I know what it's like to lose something that matters. And I saw how much that place means to you. Emma's guard softened just a fraction. You keep seeing things you shouldn't. Maybe, he said, his voice gentle, or maybe you're not as good at hiding as you think. Over the next few days, Maplewood buzzed with fundraiser plans. Emma threw herself into organizing, baking pies with Millie and designing flyers with Noah's crayons. Caleb was there too, quieter than she'd expected, hauling tables and charming donations from skeptical locals. He didn't talk much about himself, but his small acts, carrying Noah's backpack when he tagged along, slipping an extra 20 into the donation jar, started to chip away at Emma's walls. One evening, as they sorted raffle tickets at the diner, Emma caught Caleb staring at a photo on the wall, a faded shot of Millie's grand opening, 40 years ago. You ever think about starting over? He asked, his voice distant. All the time, Emma admitted, surprised by her honesty. But it's not that easy with a kid. Caleb nodded, his expression unreadable. I had a life like that once. A fiancé, a plan. She walked away when things got tough. Took my trust with her. Emma's heart ached at the rawness in his voice. She wanted to ask more, but the moment felt fragile, like a thread that could snap. Instead, she handed him a stack of tickets. You're not so bad at this small-town stuff, she said, teasing to lighten the mood. He smiled, the first real one she'd seen. Don't tell anyone. I've got a reputation to ruin. The fundraiser was set for Friday, the deadline looming. But on Wednesday, a twist hit like a freight train. Lydia arrived at the diner with a new notice. Hargrove had moved the deadline to Monday, citing business demands. The town's momentum faltered, panic creeping in. Emma found Caleb outside, his jaw tight as he read the notice. We can still do this, she said, her voice firm despite the knot in her stomach. We have to. Caleb looked at her, his eyes fierce. I'm not letting this place go down. Not for you, not for Millie. He hesitated, then added, I know what it's like to lose everything. I won't let it happen to you. Emma's breath caught. The air between them crackled, not just with shared purpose but something deeper, something that scared her as much as it drew her in. Why do you care so much? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of green in his gray eyes. Because you remind me there's still something worth fighting for. The moment hung between them, heavy with unspoken possibility. Before Emma could respond, Millie called her inside, breaking the spell. But as they worked late into the night, stealing glances across the diner, Emma felt a shift. Caleb wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was someone else. The diner buzzed with chaos on Monday morning. The new deadline day Hargrove had sprung on them. Maplewood's community had rallied, tables piled high with pies, raffle tickets, and donation jars. But the fundraiser's total was still $2,000 short. Emma's hands shook as she poured coffee, her eyes darting to the clock. Caleb stood by the door, coordinating volunteers, his calm presence a lifeline in the storm. Last night's moment by the counter. His words, "You remind me there's still something worth fighting for," lingered like a heartbeat she couldn't ignore. But there was no time for feelings, not with the diner on the line. Millie emerged from the kitchen, her gray curls frazzled but her smile defiant. "We're close, Em. Closer than I ever thought." Her voice wavered, betraying the fear she hid. Emma squeezed her hand. "We'll make it, Millie. We have to." Caleb caught her eye across the room, his nod steadying her. He'd promised to match donations up to $5,000, but even that might not be enough. Emma pushed down her doubts and dove back into the fray, selling raffle tickets to a line of locals. Noah darted through the crowd, his crayon-drawn flyers clutched proudly, and Emma's heart swelled. This was why she fought. For him, for Millie, for the life they'd carved out here. By noon, a stranger in a sleek suit walked in, his polished shoes out of place on the diner's worn linoleum. He introduced himself as Daniel, a lawyer from Nashville, and asked for Caleb. Emma's stomach twisted as she led him to the back booth, where Caleb's face hardened at the sight of the man. "Harper," Daniel said, his tone clipped. "Your family's been looking for you. You can't keep running." Emma froze, her tray forgotten. Family? Caleb had mentioned a past in New York, a fiancé who'd broken his trust. But this felt bigger. She glanced at Caleb, waiting for him to brush it off. But his shoulders slumped, like the weight he'd been carrying had just doubled. "Not here," Caleb muttered, standing. "Outside." Emma watched them step into the drizzle, her mind racing. Who was Caleb, really? And why did this man's arrival feel like it could unravel everything? Outside, the rain pattered on the diner's awning as Caleb faced Daniel. Emma lingered by the door, pretending to clean a table, close enough to overhear. Daniel's voice was sharp. "Your father's selling the company, Caleb. You walked away, but you're still a Harper. They need you to sign off or hundreds of jobs are gone." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I'm done with that life. They made their choice when they backed her over me." Emma's breath caught. The fiancé he'd mentioned, the one who'd taken his trust. She wanted to ask, to understand, but the diner's bell chimed, pulling her back inside. The fundraiser was picking up. Locals streamed in, dropping bills into jars, buying pies faster than Millie could bake them. Emma threw herself into the work, but Caleb's absence gnawed at her. When he finally returned, his eyes were darker, his usual calm frayed. "You okay?" she asked, handing him a coffee she knew he hadn't asked for. He took it, his fingers brushing hers. "Just ghosts from the past," he said, his voice low. "I'll handle it." She wanted to push, but Noah ran up, waving a handful of dollar bills. "Mom, I sold 10 flyers." His grin was brighter than the sun they hadn't seen all day, and Emma knelt to hug him, her worries easing for a moment. Caleb watched, something soft flickering in his expression. "He's a good kid," he said. "You're doing right by him." Emma's throat tightened. "I'm trying. It's not always enough." "It's more than you know," he said, his voice carrying that same quiet intensity as his notes. "You're giving him a home. That's everything." The words hit deeper than she expected, stirring memories of her own fractured childhood, of promises Jake had broken. She looked at Caleb, seeing not just the stranger who'd left a note, but a man who understood loss in a way she hadn't expected. By evening, the fundraiser's total climbed to $9,000. Caleb's $5,000 match was ready, but they were still $1,000 short. Hargrove arrived, his face smug as he surveyed the crowded diner. "Nice effort," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "But time's up." Millie stepped forward, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "We're not done yet. Give us till midnight." Hargrove scoffed but nodded, sensing the crowd's resolve. Emma's heart sank. She didn't know where they'd find another $1,000 in hours. But then Caleb pulled her aside, his expression fierce. "I can cover it," he said. "The whole thing." Emma stared. "You'd do that? For a diner you just walked into a week ago?" "It's not just the diner," he said, his eyes locking on hers. "It's you, Millie, Noah. This place, it's real. More real than anything I left behind." Her pulse raced, the air between them electric. She wanted to believe him, but trust was a fragile thing, and hers had been broken too many times. Before she could respond, Daniel reappeared, his suit now damp from the rain. "Caleb, we need to talk. Now." Caleb hesitated, then followed Daniel outside again. Emma watched through the window, her stomach churning as Daniel handed him a folder. Caleb's face paled as he read it, and for a moment, she thought he might walk away for good. The twist came just before midnight. The diner was packed, the energy frenetic as locals counted donations. Emma was refilling coffee when Caleb burst in, his coat slung over his shoulder, a fire in his eyes she hadn't seen before. "I'm staying," he announced, loud enough for the room to quiet. "And I'm covering the last 1,000. The crowd erupted in cheers, Millie pulling him into a hug. Emma's heart pounded as she approached him, her voice low. "What happened out there?" Caleb took a breath, his gaze steady. "My family's company, it's falling apart. My father wants me back to save it. But I'm done running from my past. I signed the papers to let it go. I'm here, Emma. For this. For you." Her breath caught. The weight of his words, the choice he'd made, hit her like a wave. She didn't know his whole story, but she knew what it meant to choose a new path, to fight for something real. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to," he said, stepping closer. "You showed me what it looks like to keep going, no matter what." The clock struck midnight, and Millie handed Hargrove a check. $10,000, pieced together from the town's heart and Caleb's sacrifice. Hargrove's face fell, but he took it and left, the diner safe. The crowd cheered, Noah tugging at Emma's hand, his eyes wide with pride. Days later, the diner hummed with its usual rhythm, but something had shifted. Emma felt it in the way she smiled at customers, in the lightness of Noah's laughter. Caleb was still around, helping Millie repaint the walls, his notes replaced by quiet conversations. One evening, As they cleaned up after closing, he handed her a coffee mug, his fingers lingering on hers. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice soft but sure. "But I know trust takes time. I'm here for that, too." Emma looked at him, her walls crumbling under the weight of his patience, his kindness. "I'm not good at this," she admitted, her voice shaky. "Letting people in." "Me neither," he said, a small smile breaking through. "Maybe we can figure it out together." She nodded, her heart opening just enough to let hope slip through. They weren't a fairy tale. There were scars to heal, trust to rebuild, and a future that wouldn't be easy. But as they stood in the diner's glow, Noah's drawings taped to the wall, Emma felt something she hadn't in years. A second chance. Months later, the diner thrived, a beacon of Maplewood's spirit. Emma and Caleb moved slowly, their bond growing through shared coffee breaks and quiet moments. Noah adored him, and Caleb's stories of New York made the boy's eyes light up. There were challenges. Emma's fear of being hurt again, Caleb's struggle to redefine himself. But they faced them side by side, one small act of kindness at a time. As Emma locked up one night, Caleb slipped a final napkin into her hand. "You're still stronger than you know, and I'm glad I stayed to see it." She smiled, tucking it into her pocket, knowing some notes were worth keeping. If this story touched you, comment where you're from and subscribe to the channel.